Great. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Immersion K webinar today on the future of XR in education. I'm joined today by some amazing panelists. Thank you all for joining me. We have Martin McDonnell here from Soluis and Sublime, Pippa Bostock from the University of Portsmouth, Alison Watson from Class of Your Own, and Alex Gibson from the Technological University of Dublin. So we have a lot to go over today. I mean, it's a very broad topic, and we have a bit of a mix here of people working with different age groups, different levels of education, and a tool provider with Soluis and Sublime. And so we're going to go through a bunch of different areas. Please drop some questions in the Q&A as we go along, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But to start off, I'm just going to have everyone go around and introduce themselves and give a bit of a background on what they're doing within XR. So we'll start with Martin and go around.
Hi guys, great to be here. Thanks a million, Asha and team, for organising all of this. Amazing. Yes, my background, 3 years ago, co-founded a company called Sublime. And later this week, so the timing can be better, later this week we'll launch our first product, which will be called Edify. And it's a tool for remote education, which I guess makes it super relevant for today. It was 2 years in R&D in partnership with Glasgow University, where its main original purpose was to be a VR teaching tool. So there'd be VR labs in universities and various subjects across many areas of the curriculum would be taught. Obviously, as times change, and we're in changing times, there was a real opportunity in end of February, beginning of March, we realised to slightly change up and use that kind of Unity-based VR tool as a remote learning tool. So with a small shift up in our development, we'll be launching something very soon. It'll be available in this coming academic term in September. My longer background is another company called Soluis, which I founded 20 years ago. And that company is all around using 3D visualization, so 3D Studio Max, and much more recently Unity and Unreal as real-time tools in the property sector, real estate. Say 20 years of creating virtual environments in that sense. So that's my background, and great to be here. Thanks, guys.
Cool. All right, Pippa, do you want to go next?
Hi, thank you also, Asha, to Anita and yourselves and the team for putting this together. Very much appreciated and lovely to be here. So I'm from the University of Portsmouth, where along with my colleague Alex Council, we head up the Centre for Creative and Immersive XR. We're lucky enough to have just received significant funding from the Solent Local Enterprise Partnership and HM Government to build a centre to bring together the whole of the immersive XR pipeline. So we've been involved in a number of projects over the last sort of 10, 15 years, starting with motion capture, building more into immersive XR. At the moment, we're involved in one of the Audiences of the Future demonstrator projects, one led by the Royal Shakespeare Company, looking at performance and how audiences of the future will engage with performance in all its different ways. We've done a lot of other things with the Audiences of the Future. We've also done some smaller programs looking at uses in museums, also other theatre companies. But we also like to put our students out there into the real world, working on real challenges, real problems. We've done a lot of very successful projects with the Royal Navy. We've got students working out in the NHS, across the whole range of sectors. So for us, it's not just about the entertainment industry, it's about the uses for immersive XR across all of the sectors. And that's why we want the centre to make a real difference, because we'll be able to use it to actually show why immersive XR is important and how it can help businesses address their challenges.
That's excellent. We'll go with Alison next.
Hi, thanks Asha, and hello to everyone. My former life, I was a land surveyor 10 years ago when I got a little bit frustrated with all the new school building projects and not being able to involve young people really well and constructively. So I wanted to get them interested in the construction industry, but from a design and engineering perspective. So I developed a curriculum for 11 to 18-year-olds. It's been running for a long time now, and we've got kids out in industry through it. I've been working with Sublime and indeed Soluis for nearly as long as a decade to bring the site to the classroom through VR. So enabling kids to work on real sites all around the world. You know, if you've got a laser scan and VR equipment, you can bring it anywhere. Been working more recently with Bentley Systems on smart cities and digital twins. So basically doing all the things we do in industry with young people, and it's really exciting. So thank you for having me.
Amazing. And Alex? Oh, you're muted. Classic
Thanks,
Zoom.
Sasha. Thanks, Sasha. I was trying to be good, but I don't have a wind tunnel here behind me, so I'm okay, I think. Hi, everybody. Alex Gibson's my name, from Technological University, Dublin. I'm Assistant Head of School at the School of Marketing, and I've had an interest in AR and VR since 2014, when I was first asked to speak around the topic. I run a conference since then, which is called AR VR Innovate, which is I suppose trying to bridge the gap between the theoretical and the practical. So the emphasis is very much on companies sharing case studies, best practice, not just Irish, but we have a lot of UK companies who attend every year. And I know Immersion UK have been supporters and participants, as have Soluis and Martin and the team in the past. I suppose in terms of our university, I think one of the things that we would say and see, looking on with a little degree of envy across to what's happening in the UK, there seems to be a lot more funding and structured support around the universities, a lot more establishments of actual formal centres, as we've seen, like Pippa alluded to there earlier, and I'm aware of several others as well. We don't really have that level of development here in Ireland. So one of my challenges and the things I'm trying to working on is put together coalitions of interest among academics, not just in my own university, but we've partnered with University College Dublin on a number of funding applications, so those are in train at the moment. We're certainly keen to bring AR and VR into the curriculum on a broad range of disciplines in third level. I myself have done so in relation to marketing and tourism, which would have been my background, academic background. So we've certainly worked on integrating AR in particular, I think it has to be said, through mobile devices in curricula for events management, etc. But we've certainly planned out, and we've got a lot of initiatives looking at AR and VR across a multidisciplinary framework, and that's one of the areas that excites us as we go forward. And certainly COVID has been an accelerant. Certainly the discussion around AR and VR, we're reaching higher up the decision-making ladder, let's just say, with both within funders and also even within the university itself. I think there's a strong interest now. We'll probably get into that in some of the panel discussion anyway, in terms of the immediate opportunity as well as the medium and long term.
That's awesome. So we have a real, different experience in the panel today. And I mean, it is a very, very broad topic. There's lots to cover. So I guess we'll start off with, talking about what you all feel are the biggest opportunities in the space right now. I think, we kind of have to cover XR for primary and secondary education compared to in higher education, using XR to teach regular subjects, and also, training XR skills to develop a new pipeline of XR professionals. There's a lot of variation in there. So feel free to just let me know, what do you think are the biggest opportunities going forward in the next few years? Pippa, you go first. I won't call it chat, so you guys all just jump in, ask each other questions too. It's good.
I think for me, it's such an exciting time in XR. It's just the beginning. I was talking the other day, and I think it's in 40 years' time, we'll look back and we'll see this is the beginning of XR. We'll see it's where it's all growing from here. This is where the film industry was 40 years ago. It's going to grow from here and from where we are now. I think that's the biggest opportunity. It's also partly the biggest challenge, in that there is so much we need to do. As Alex was saying, there's a limit of facilities. That's the whole reason we've fought so hard to bring the facilities we have to Portsmouth, because we realise that most funding opportunities will buy you revenue. They'll get you staff and people to come in, but actually it's about having those facilities and being able to access them. That's why, to me, it's about enabling people to come and understand what is possible. So many businesses come through the door and they don't either understand fully what immersive XR is, or they don't see how it can apply to them. By getting them in and showing them the possibilities, that the magic, if you like, can start from there. So I think it's that skills pipeline. It's enabling all of the students to have the skills so that they can go out and help industry to keep growing. But it's also enabling businesses to see the art of the possible for them. For me, that's the two opportunities.
Yeah, I'll dive in, Martin, here. I think everything you said, Pippa, I think from our point of view, kind of got two hats or two phases for me. We've been delivering as a business XR experiences. And I would probably have a quick bash at defining XR as quite a lot broader than just wearing a headset. I do think the VR headset is becoming more ubiquitous, more comfortable, more usable. But I think there are many other broader experiences, certainly the kind of phone-based AR. I think you can go wider. I think we really should allow a wider definition, where we talked about shared immersion for a number of years, using projection to surround us in an immersed experience, and even now remotely for remote education. I think there's a level of immersion we can do and engage in at least a little bit through a Zoom call like this. So for us, I mean, since we started Sublime in 2017, we did about £5.5 million worth of business, mostly in the Middle East, doing big scale events. So I think that will continue for a while. But the moment for me now is, I think we've just been instantly forced into remote as a way to work, and we're just about to see a massive requirement to remote teach at all levels of education. And I think we could even extend that into lifelong learning. So you could go way up all the way through all forms of enterprise education in the workplace. All of that stuff now is going to have a much bigger element of remote, obviously. And to me, that's a huge opportunity right now. We were on track to launch in September 21, and we've massively accelerated in the last 12 weeks so that we can launch September 20 and deliver a remote learning solution that's based on XR technologies. But for a lot of people, that might just be joining an XR session, but through a Zoom call. And I think we could broaden it, as well as, I think the centres of excellence are vital to build the industry. But I think also to build the audience, we need to sort of broaden the entry points as well.
This was an R&D project that was Innovate UK funded, that you
That's right, exactly,
accelerated.
Yes, I'll do the background for 2 seconds. So it was Project Mobius for 2 years. It was Innovate UK funded, about £1 million worth of funding from Innovate for our business Sublime to partner with Glasgow University. And we talk about built by academics for academics. So it was almost entirely driven by one of 10 different, we call them app champions within Glasgow University, across the curriculum. Each in their specialist subject matter specified how they thought, very specifically in that case, VR could give a transformative experience in education. And the second element of it that we are super keen on is learning how learners learn. There's too many learns in the same sentence, but the idea of being able to use the technology to really understand the pedagogy better and to get some real deep insights into how learning happens. So both of those things are 2 years into R&D. The intention was 1 more year of live testing at Glasgow University. As I said, we've accelerated everything. The first 6 months of live testing, September to December 19, went very well. So we're in a position to change up and go. So we'll be launching later this week, as I say, but this is the evolution of a real product out of a 2 years worth of Innovate funded R&D. And you're right, Alex. I think we have so much to be thankful for in the UK in terms of the funding that is available. It's not always the easiest to access. Sometimes it's easier than others. But when you get engaged and are able to access that funding, it can be transformative. It's very difficult to see how else you could start something this kind of speculative and forward-looking without that kind of funding being there.
Yeah, if I can jump in, Martin, I mean, that's certainly my sense talking to UK academics, and you know, we do look wistfully. We have various innovation funds in Ireland, but they're across a range of disruptive industries. So AR and VR have to fight its corner, where I do think there's a case to be made at a government level to get behind this and create a centre, but they haven't done that. I think, just if I can just reiterate one thing about us diving into the remote learning, and you're 100% right on that. I think one key thing that I think is important to state is the socialization potential, both the opportunity and the challenge. I think that for educators, one of our biggest concerns in the forthcoming academic year, and I'm imagining it's the same in the UK, is just how little face-to-face time students probably will have in the actual university itself. So we're looking at how do we replicate that. Yeah, Zoom is one of those things, but particularly for first year. So I'm looking myself at innovative ways of using VR or immersive tech. And you're absolutely right, Martin, to think broader, because if we're not careful, we create another digital divide, which is those kids or those households or those universities where they can give everybody a VR headset. And so it has to be broader than that, but some experiences can be developed for VR, but should also equally work on mobile devices, for example. So things like Verbella and some of those platforms, and I'm looking forward very much to see Edify, what you guys are doing, because I think the more you make the platform operate across different learner contexts, because that's the key thing. We don't know what the remote learning experience is for any individual student. So we need, if we're to make immersive technology work, we need to be flexible in how it's delivered to them.
That's really interesting. Alison?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues, I mean, we've just like Martin, in the past few months, literally since the 23rd of March, Class of Your Own has just, really, really escalated in the way we deliver education. So we're now training teachers remotely, whereas we were training students remotely. And certainly in the summer, being able to create summer schools, giving kids access via Zoom, and all the kids are kind of like, why don't we just use Zoom? Well, we can't use Zoom because that's the safeguarding issue. I think the biggest issue is always safeguarding when you're under 18 and particularly under 16. So finding a platform where it's a very, very safe space and the teacher themselves feels that it's safe and the parents feel that it's safe. So one of our biggest obstacles has been that safeguarding issue. And I know just a few weeks ago we were asked, what can you do for a virtual work experience? Is there anything possible? And we actually ran a work experience for 2,000 students, all online, all of them using digital technologies from Fortnite right through to Revit and Bentley, the whole spectrum of digital technologies. And the kids, I think because they were left more to their own devices, the teachers kind of stepped back since it was a work experience scenario. But it was just incredible what kids could achieve within that week. And you kind of say, well, if we can do this in a week, think of what we can do when we're back in school and everything's sort of back to normal. And I think there's a real reticence to progress into this space from, forgive me, the average teacher in school. I think there's a fear of the technology because, as a teacher, you're the holder of the knowledge. So letting go and let the kids advance, you can really hold them back as a teacher. And certainly, as Martin was saying about watching kids and how they learn to learn, it's been absolutely tremendous this past few months, because we've been watching kids how they learn to learn for a decade. But when they really, really are left to their own devices, and I mean devices as in technology, they just progress so quickly. So I hope that we never go back. I think we've done more for kids in the past 3 months than we've done for them in 10 years. And I've actually said myself, it's almost like, we've been around for all this time and people have suddenly just almost flicked a switch and said, oh my God, so that's what you do. So it's been pretty amazing for us. And I think we're in real danger when we get back to school that we just go back to normal. And that's my biggest fear.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I've said this before, but it feels like the world's been collectively forced into digital transformation, even if they didn't want to do it. Everyone's being pushed into it, kicking or screaming. It's happening. So I agree with you. I hope it doesn't go back. So I want to. I also really like the point you made about safeguarding, though, because I know that data security and things like that, and security just generally across the board with immersive tools is an issue that's in government, that's in business or school. I find some companies that I've seen that are working on things like self-sovereign identity and trying to create like digital trust layers on top of people's data in like virtual worlds so they can own all the data of their avatars and things like that. Really interesting, but it's really, really early days for that. I want to go back to what everyone's kind of said about, because I think it's one of the bigger issues here, which is around training teachers and training the trainers, really. Upskilling educators is a really big, it's a big problem, actually. So Alison, I'd love to know more about things you've been doing around that. I also want to signpost people to a couple of programs that one's government funded through Story Futures Academy called Train the Trainer. And then there's another organization called Educators in VR, which is also trying to kind of do a similar thing. And funnily enough, Alison, they created a Students in VR conference as well, which is basically student-led. They're teaching them to use the platforms and then, run the stuff themselves and trying to let go and let them self-educate. I think that's really interesting. Does anyone have any thoughts on upskilling educators?
I think the biggest thing, we go straight into let's teach teachers tech. It's not actually the way to go. The first thing you need to do is let's teach confidence. When I look at the college system, so the FE college system, it's already got a, kind of set in stone reputation of teaching sort of more non-academic subjects, and particularly with construction industry that I can talk about forever, more of the biblical trades. So starting to talk about, you know, joinery and bricklaying, etc., and then start to talk about tech, it just doesn't compute. So actually, when we've been working really closely with a great college up in the northwest, Manchester College, who've been doing some stuff around gamification themselves for the trades. Really, really interesting work that they've been doing, developing their own platforms. And when we were asked to help train teachers in digital technologies, we of course jumped at the chance because we really, really love working with teachers. We find so much about being human, never mind being a teacher. And we actually, you know, the first thing they said was, can you teach some of the sort of, 3D modeling tools? And we said, no, we won't teach 3D modeling tools. That's not how you start. Let's talk to them first about how they feel, because these are human beings who are absolutely terrified. They've been bricklayers and joiners, plasterers in the past, and suddenly to go, oh, you're going to be using something like Revit, or, you know, it's really, really scary stuff. And we've found that over the sort of 6 weeks that we've been working with them and working on building their confidence and their trust first, and treating them as normal human beings instead of, as I think is the biggest issue, you know, we immediately put them on a course to train them in a digital technology. It's not the way to go. You've got to get their trust first. And when I think of how these guys are on, and they are all guys, they're all, you know, time served joiners, etc. They've been on sites before, etc. And now they're training kids. And, you know, giving themselves some scaffolding in confidence building, and then moving gently into technology. We found immense success in just 6 weeks. And now these guys are saying, can't wait for kids to come back so I can teach them how to model buildings. It's got to be about overcoming fear first.
Very cool. And can I grab that? Just we're probably at a much earlier, well, we're definitely at a much earlier stage and less experience than Alison has in this idea of train the trainer or teach the teacher. We've found over the last 2 years in the kind of R&D phase, again, we're at a different stage. We're talking about subject matter experts at academic teaching level, and they're very, very comfortable in their own skin, in their own space. But as soon as there's an element of, for instance, broadcast themselves on a Zoom call, or any time that we've asked them to step into a more kind of open, engaging public sense, we've instantly split the audience, and we had 10, as we say, app champions across different, and maybe 4 or 5 were very keen, and maybe others weren't so keen to be that kind of outward going communicator. And then all of the stuff you're saying, Ali, about taking on the technology. So our impression at the moment is the best way to go is to try and build a community between those teachers. I know you've done some of that, Ali. I think you talk about your Facebook group being this kind of incredible kind of community of self-help, essentially. And I do think that other academics trust each other. I guess teachers have that peer thing and that kind of shared experience. So I wonder if, I don't know what anyone else in the panel thinks about that, but the idea that trying to enable and build and nurture communities, obviously we need to seed it in our own technology terms, but then letting them loose, curate and help, but largely trying and create a community that can encourage and teach each other to some extent. I don't know if you guys think that works or we need more intervention. That's my thought.
I actually really agree with that, and I really like that point. I feel like a lot of the most powerful movements in this I've seen have been really grassroots and led by, you know, small community groups in Facebook and things like that that have blown up over the last couple of years. I know Steve Banbury does a CPD and VR in like the Engage platform. He's getting like educators from around the world interested in XR. He's been doing that for a few years, and that's gotten really big. If anyone knows of any other communities like this, please flag them in the chat. I think that's really interesting to share that.
I mean, I think there are such communities, I mean, educators in VR, as you say, and then alt space, there's quite a few, but just teasing out, maybe playing devil's advocate with Martin, I've created that sort of community within my university in the context of a major funding application, you know, so it was in the context, so we got 40 different academics from like not quite 40 disciplines together. So we now have a group who are interested, but I still think there's a catalyst need. I mean, in terms of, we need to ask the question, what is the ambition for the immersive sector in terms of education? If we believe our own propaganda, this is the most transformative of the technologies. You know, Edgar Dale's cone of learning, you know, the theory of how it enhances learning is very persuasive. So I do think there's, as well as the sort of bottom up organic creating the communities, you know, there needs to be serious intervention by government, its agencies, and at the universities with, for example, the colleges of education, like particularly primary and secondary school, where the obvious question to ask is how much are primary school educators going through 3 or 4 years degree of education in a primary degree, how much are they currently being exposed to AR and VR? My suspicion is very, very little at all. And it's the same in second level, and even in my own university, all academics going through my university have to do a certificate in third level education. It's part of the deal on their appointment, but they have zero exposure to AR VR as part of that. So I think there needs to be a top-down as well as a bottom-down approach to this. How that gets funded is another question, but I think it's crucial.
I agree with Alex. I think also for me, it's about making sure we're using VR and AR and XR more broadly for the right things. And I completely agree with Martin's earlier point. It's not just about headsets. It's one of the most powerful experiences I've ever done is dark fields, headphones, audio only experience in a black container. Absolutely mind-blowing. So I mean immersion in the broadest possible sense. I think it's when we play with those substitutional reality effects and we have things that feel like crunchy leaves underfoot. That's what we remember things best when we actually live them. That's where the power of immersive XR is. That's where we should use it when it's best used and save it almost for when it's best used. Because if you do VR for the sake of it, and we have companies come in all the time saying, I want to make something in VR. Now we say to them, why? Because if you do something that's just a gimmick, you just do it once, put it on the shelf, and you'll kind of rule that out and say, oh, I'm not going to do that again. That was a waste of money. If you do it for the right reasons, then you'll end up with something really powerful that will grow. As you can see with Alison and Martin's work, you'll end up with something amazing that can help education go forward. I also agree with Alex about kids as well. I mean, I've got 3 young children. My 7-year-old has a pet dragon in VR that she will feed every day and want to play with. She did her homework on the Amazon rainforest in VR. So I think I'm kind of cheating with the home educating somewhat, but you have to use what's there. And I've seen how much it's fired their imagination, their ambition. And I really wish that I could help to give that to a lot more children of that age, because it helps them so much.
That makes me think
also because learning is such a social experience, and my big fear, and this is why Martin and I have been doing the work around shared immersion for children particularly, and indeed for teachers, because when you're confined to goggles, and that headset, it's a very, very solitary experience. And children, I mean, the one thing that we want children to be able to do is to go out on site and discuss, is this the right space for my building? Should I put it over there? Should I orientate it this way? How is the sun going to impact my building? How am I going to improve my building? What about the surroundings? What about the neighborhood, the community? Now, if you're just in your own headset, you've got to take it off and go, I saw this. Did you see that? There's something about shared immersion, and particularly with younger children and young people, they want to discuss. And it's so important that we encourage conversation. And there's been so much bad press around, technology full stop in isolating children, and they go off into their bedrooms and you just don't see them. To me, it should be a shared experience. And the sooner we can move towards class sizes, actually discussing their projects with each other, we've got to bring out that social experience.
Plus, I think kids, they're going to grow up expecting with this level of expectation as well for the classroom. As you said, like they're native to this stuff now. I don't know if you guys saw the math lesson that was taught in like Half-Life Alyx, for example, like getting creative about lesson planning in VR for, regular teaching subjects. That's what the expectation is going to be at, I think, going forward. Do you have any other?
Sure. I was going to chuck in, Asha, sorry,
go for it.
Just on that, and we all look at our own lives, but I've got young kids as well. And I think I opened a kind of talk thing at a conference once, trying to work out, 7 years ago, showing my then 9-year-old eldest leading a construction project in Minecraft with her friend up the road. And they were sharing a phone call, sharing a screen, sharing an environment, and live designing and having design conversations. And to this day, so we've got all the cousins together at the moment, there's 8 of them all together. They will go into Minecraft, split the screen 4 ways, or sometimes remote connect to each other, and get quite deep into some form of creation project. And I think that expectation that's going to come from the awesome gaming experiences they have is going to bleed right into their expectations of education and work and life in general. And I think education and the workplace are not really ready for that level of expectation and requirement. And the gaming world has nailed it for 20 years. And I really do think there's so much to be learned from that space. Half-Life Alyx is an amazing exemplar of how to create awesome VR experiences. But I think those shared social things you mentioned, I think we've all talked about it, is vital. If we're going to do it, if we're going to achieve it, then it needs to be that.
I think one of the quirkiest and most innovative uses of just thinking what you said there about gaming, I saw some US company had done a hack on Red Dead Redemption. I don't know if any of you play it. It's a really, really cool sort of set in the Wild West, but they actually ran their group discussions around a campfire, a virtual campfire, and took on the role sort of avatars of, and that's almost the level of, you know, as I've come supporting what Martin's saying there. I think younger people who are immersing, spending hours of their days in these PlayStation environments, you know, they're open, receptive, maybe even have an expectation of that sort of novelty. So I certainly think I've been just playing around with things like Mozilla Hubs myself the last, you know, 2 or 3 weeks, and been really impressed with them. I do think in terms of the short term, as in, you know, the return to college, I'm thinking about my own students now coming into 3rd level. I'm very interested to look at that as a kind of a, maybe saying it's a midway point is not doing it justice, but something between the sort of real world interaction and the 2-dimensionality of Zoom. I think it's also a bit more democratic, those type of shared experiences, where yet with some of them, with Mozilla, for example, you can put on a VR headset if you are fortunate enough to have one, but if you don't, Mozilla Hub, sorry, yeah, it works particularly, it works very well in a desktop environment. I've been messing around with that. So I think we're going to see an explosion in that in the next 6 to 12 months, because millions of people are in those spaces. Facebook are in beta. Most people will know around this themselves, which Facebook Rooms, Horizons, a lot of the Facebooks and Googles of this world are going to create these spaces anyway and invite their audiences. So we, as educators, I think there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I mean, it's really interesting to see how quickly everything is kind of moving. We recently just saw Imperial College, for example, rolling out, you know, the HoloLens as a way to do virtual ward rounds for medical students, for example. Which to me it's amazing. I really wonder about the logistics of that, and I wonder, you know, kind of what's the reality of setting up something like that with, you know, mass amounts of headsets. Pippa, you know what it's like to have to do procurement for setting up a lab, and you've been running the existing lab at in Portsmouth for ages. Like, what's the reality behind that? What are the challenges?
I think the challenges are we're in such a new sector. It's like anything. There is no one headset that's leading the way in any of these areas. I mean, we work really hard to stay platform agnostic. So, for example, within our main testing sets we're buying in for the new centre, we're doing 5 different headsets and making sure we have enough of 5 different headsets to be able to run location-based experiences.
Can I ask which ones they are?
Currently we're looking at bringing in Oculus Quest, Vive, HTC, iPro, I think it is. We're doing Rifts as well, and the HP Reverb 2. I think they're currently on the list, but obviously there could be an announcement tomorrow and that could change, but they're the ones we're currently headlining. But for us, it's about, you know, if our friends at the RSC come through the door tomorrow and say, we want to do this experience on this platform, we have to make sure we have the kit for that. But then the next day, another company could come through, Philharmonic Orchestra, whoever it might be, and say, oh, we want to use this headset and this backpack. So for us as a facilitator and an enabler, we have to have as many different types of kit as possible. So we have HoloLens 2s. We have, you know, obviously the day Apple glasses get released, we'll get those in as well. You know, we're talking to Nreal. We were working with Magic Leap before. Obviously they've had a bit of a change in direction. You know, it's having everything, and that's where the procurement gets difficult. Or public sector procurement's never fun anyway. But that's what adds an extra layer of complexity, because you're trying to make sure you have everything needed and you have all the different platforms covered. And
Pippa, can I jump in and ask you a question in terms of particularly where you may be doing things on procurement or contract? I mean, is it a requirement that you also develop a sort of ubiquitous WebXR platform for if people don't have a headset, that they can have a desktop experience anyway? Really depends on the project. In one particular large project we're doing at the moment will be delivered through headsets, phones, and tablets. So it really does depend on the project. I'd say that's more project specific than centre specific. Okay. I agree with you. It would be good because obviously we're very aware a lot of this work is it's wonderful, amazing work, but you have to go to international film festivals to go and see it. And
it's so exclusive, and what we want to do is lower that barrier to entry and now enable more and more people to see it, to be able to engage with it, and to enable more high quality work to be created.
Yeah, this is why I'm jumping in. Like, we had, it wasn't actually successful, but it was a more than 10 million euro. I can give you that broad figure. So it was a very big application for funding for XR and VR for just 2 universities, and even with that, have 50% maximum of students would have some XR experience throughout the 4 years. That's it. 50% would never, in the entire 4 years of the course, have any XR or VR, and that was with that huge level of investment. So I suppose that's the point I'm trying to emphasize, is that, you know, we have these centers, but the scale opportunity, we have to look beyond just the headsets, because given the, you know, otherwise in reality, only a tiny proportion of students are really going to have an XR VR experience. And yet I would suggest that it's vital that a huge number of students do, because Martin, you know, from the industry point of view, knows this. I mean, industry have an expectation of people coming off courses that they have some exposure, at least exposure, whatever, about competency in developing in these tool sets.
Yeah, I'll say quickly, I've said before, but I think exactly that. I think the prime experience almost always is the fully immersed with all the kit best experience. But I think we need to open the pathways into all of this education pretty much via a Zoom call window as our view, Zoom, Teams, Skype, pick your platform. But the idea of ours is that the teacher is immersed and that they have the power of being in a dangerous or an otherworldly environment. They can manipulate things, they can move cameras around and run a session. So the power of sort of manipulable environment is there. But those students that don't have a VR headset can just log into the session as a viewer and can type in questions a bit like we're doing today. So I think we'll need to keep it that broad for a while until we see some ubiquity of the hardware becoming bring your own device mobile phone level. Until we're there, and we're probably 5 years plus from there, I think we need to keep that wide open door. But again, there's a debate in our team always, how much do we push on to pure VR experiences, because they are often the best teaching experience, the best learning experience. I think we need to keep the door open. I agree.
I agree. Schools for a start, when you think about the funding that's around and the low tech that's in schools, I mean, seriously, some of the schools that we work with, you could almost cry. We have to go out to industry to get a decent computer to give the kids even a reasonable desktop experience, never mind the VR experience. But I think the one thing that governments could do a lot more of, and I'm, there's an awful lot of talk and no action. And when we're developing new qualifications, for example, to upskill young people, there's a new T-levels coming out in the UK this September. The government talks a good game, but when it comes to investment in secondary education, there's absolutely no investment. We've got no budget for teacher training. There's no budget for hardware. And if we're talking about digital skills, you can forget it. And a lot of the teachers that even, when you ask them, what do you think is meant by digital skills? They'll talk about Word for Windows. They won't talk about VR and AR, or even,
Word, Microsoft Word, seriously.
Seriously. Because
wow.
The skills sector, you've got to remember, is classed as vocational. And the vocational and academic divide is still as huge now as it was when I left school a long time ago. So as soon as you start about upskilling, you go more into vocational programs. Vocational equals FE College. FE College has no funding whatsoever. And it's this vicious circle all the time. So
I don't want to interrupt you, Ali. Sorry, I was going to ask a question. Am I echoing? Sorry.
Nope.
Excuse me. 2 seconds. Sorry, I pressed the wrong unmute button. I was going to ask you, Ali, you've done a lot internationally. I know you've done a lot in Indonesia, Middle East, but in India. How do you see the international picture in that sense versus the UK? Is it quite different?
It's a really good question, actually. I see some of the Southeast Asian countries being really, really progressive. Money is always the great divide. If you look at the international schools where, they really have this aspiration to be really progressive digitally, they can afford good stuff because it's private tuition, it's lots of, private money, private sponsorship. When you get into, I was in India earlier on this year, and there's one computer between 100 children. So
Divide is massive.
it's a great divide. So internationally, yes, there is some good stuff. I think the most progressive governments, you know, the governments who see the opportunity that, you know, you can do to bridge this, certainly from a poorer people, poorer children who don't have access to, you know, the technologies. I think we could even learn a lot from them, because they're looking at VR to really be able to reach out, and that's through a desktop. Coming back to this country, I'm appalled. I'm going to say this country, I mean England. I think there's some great stuff going on in Scotland, but while ever a country is just so obsessed with academic progress equals, you know, traditional science, traditional maths, and even Latin, then we're going to get nowhere.
So guys, this is very funny. We have a surprise person that's just jumped on the call. It's Adrian Cowell, who's actually from Imperial and helped to pilot the board round with the HoloLens. So you happen to be here. So Alan, or Adrian, sorry, if you want to unmute yourself, he's offered to give a bit of an insight into what that took to set up.
Sure. Hi. Yes.
Love a surprise guest.
Well, it was nice to see this on, and thought it'd be interesting to listen to. And yeah, it is very interesting, and there's probably a lot of things I can say. But just very much talking about the project that Imperial is doing. Yes, I suppose if challenges wise, GDPR was our biggest challenge. Amazing how difficult that was to actually. Not get around, but effectively apply with, to be able to even show anything on the HoloLens that could be then transmitted to students.
Oh, interesting.
However, it was done very much. And the other big factor here was actually trying to get what the HoloLens can see, having a stable network, and then pushing it out to 200 odd students to view.
Because it's one doctor who wears the HoloLens on their walk through the wards, is that right?
That particular example, that is correct, yes. And it was one doctor, he did the ward round with a few other clinicians with him, and that effectively is being broadcast to the other year 5 students at the time. As part of their ward rounds, because obviously they're not allowed in the wards. Since then, the take up for everyone wanting to use a HoloLens in remote teaching has been almost ridiculous. So obviously everyone has seen a potential with it. I'm very concerned that as long as we recognise that it's not a gimmick. I mean, and the interactivity and the benefit of using a HoloLens, say, instead of just having a GoPro strapped to your head is evident. But the other factor for Imperial is the labs. There's no expectation that people will be able to use labs this year, and so there's been great exploring how we're going to initiate labs, either in VR or AR, in the coming months.
On that topic, and I mean, we are all in COVID times here. I mean, the one question we've got here is how easily are headsets cleaned given COVID? For all of you with labs, what are your thoughts on what that's going to look like?
Something we've just been exploring, and actually we've gone with a technology called CleanBox, which is an American-based company. So ours are literally being shipped somewhere over from America to us at the moment. So if you haven't already looked at CleanBox, I can recommend them as a solution.
They use UV technology, yeah. So if people haven't checked that yet, I think the typical CleanBox takes four VR sets, the standard unit, but you can put four VR sets in, and it's about a 3-minute turnaround. So it's pretty quick if you have volume. But there are other alternatives available, as they say, as the BBC would say. Yeah.
It's interesting, and it's a bit, it's both sides of the coin, in that we're trying to develop, the tools like Martin's doing that's going to enable people to teach remotely, but then we're also having to set up physical labs and get people like learning in those physical labs. It's almost like you need both at the same time. Both are not necessarily inexpensive to do.
I mean, just jumping in, I mean, in one sense, COVID happened a little early in the sense that, if we're realistic, I think all of us have, we've PhD students looking at VR for teaching languages, or VR for fire extinguisher training, but they're all, the quantum of lab training that you would need to replicate. There just isn't the time scale to get that ready for February. So, I mean, I was talking to one of my colleagues who works in timber engineering masters, where, you know, the students come into that environment for a week working on very, very dangerous machinery, as you can imagine. And he, as he said to me, he said, we'd pay virtually anything now if there was a VR, if someone had created this in VR, but it can't be done in time. So that's why I say, a little bit facetiously, but, you know, I think people can see how VR would have been enormously helpful, but I think that we just don't have the scale and time to do that quickly enough for some of those specific rapid replacement contexts. We really, as educators, we really wish we did, because it's a very real problem.
I wish we'd planned this, Alex, but actually you're probably setting up the topic that we've debated most over the last 12 weeks, is that how do we do volume of curriculum, volume of labs in the time frame? And the only solution is the kind of build your own DIY crowdsource. So that's effectively what we're going to launch, is the ability for anyone to import their own model. And any of us that have been in this space for a long time know that that's fraught with challenges. But people to enable them to import their own model. Some of the work we did with Alison over the years to enable kids to bring in their own designs in 3D is exactly the kind of stuff we want to apply here. So people will be able to bring in at least their own models of the subject matter, and also 360 views of their own environments. And we are effectively trying to open the door to academics to build their own labs live and then teach from them. Yes, there's a learning curve, but I think this is the way to go. Is that back to that community idea? Is if we can make the tools so easy, then maybe folk can build their own labs. I'm actually being rained on here, so I'm going to run for cover while I... Yeah, honestly, I started to flip disguise. I was nearly putting on my sunglasses.
There was something.
That's a dramatic weather change.
At one point, there was sort of blue thing behind you there, Martin. At one point, there was a blue thing. I don't know what that was.
Me either. I'll keep listening, but the video is going to die. Sorry, guys.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Can I just, one thing we haven't really, I probably don't have a lot of time to discuss it, but I think,
go for it.
I was talking about the technology, the hardware, the funding. I mean, there's also the fundamental question of what are we trying to teach, or what do we want students to learn? And I think that, I mean, we could spend a whole seminar on this as well, but certainly one of the things that I think is really interesting, as well as the sort of technical subjects or skill-based, or things that we just talked about in terms of labs, etc. I think one of the really interesting areas that we will see more and more is the sort of soft skills. So things like leadership, presentation skills. I can't remember the citation, but it was I think it was in the US. One of the top 4 accounting firms were using VR in recruitment training to counteract the problem of gender bias. So basically applicants had to perform a task, but they were performing it in an avatar format rather than as a male or female. And it had proved really interesting as both a recruitment tool, but secondly as something that you could integrate for sure on a human resources HRM curriculum, for example, around bias and bias. So I think the soft skills dimension to this, particularly in 3rd level, we're beginning to get a sense of how, particularly VR, because of its immersiveness, can be a really exciting place in the future.
I think that's really interesting, Alex. For us, though, it's also about bringing industry in and working in partnership with them. And I think that's critical for us, because we want to ensure that industry's needs are met, but also that the skills that we're teaching our students and our graduates are relevant, and we're working on real world challenges. So for us, it's those soft skills as well, but also making sure we're working on real world challenges at the same time.
Yeah.
It really feels like it's like everything needs to be covered simultaneously. It feels like a massive, insurmountable task. What was it you were saying to me earlier, Pippa, from the Story Futures Academy Skills Gap report?
Yeah, I think my favourite finding from that report, I really recommend that report about the skills in immersive XR. What always jumps out at me is the fact that they call these graduates that are skilled in real-time games engine, they call them unicorns. Now, the reason they call them unicorns is because they're so rare and mythical and sought after, and so in demand for their coding and their developing skills. They are literally as rare and mythical as unicorns. So in a way, at Portsmouth, we're trying to become our very own unicorn farm, in that we want to create the students and the graduates that the industry needs and able to continue this growth. Yeah, unicorn farmers are us, I kind of guess.
Yeah, interestingly, we actually...
There, of course, is that, you know, it's not... The kids, the young kids want to be that. They want to get in there, and they're champing at the bit to move forward, but we stifle them. You know, it's the teaching and learning that goes on that actually stifles that creativity, stifles that stepping up. We've got a fabulous program launching up in the Northwest in just a matter of weeks, where we really are looking to children building a digital twin. And I say children, they're as young as 11, building a digital twin of a whole regeneration program that's going on in one of the poorest areas of the Northwest. You know, we're talking to Centre for Digital Build Britain about, you know, doing some research on that and the impact in terms of those softer skills, in terms of showing real leadership, in terms of confidence, in terms of team building, all those great things. We're going to do it digitally, and it'll be transformational for education. I know it, you know it, we all know. We're all people who are working in that realm anyway. But again, the reticence of you know, more shall we say, learned folks in government, for example, to actually move into that space and allow young people to access that kind of digital innovation is really, really frustrating. It really is. And you know, the fact that it's been around deprivation that we've been able to move this forward is kind of sad in a way, but it's moving forward nonetheless. So I'm really excited to see what happens up in Liverpool in the next few months. It's going to be really, really cool. What happens, you know, if children build their own cities versus the ones that we're doing as grown-ups, and I think there'll be some really positive things to come out of it. Kids have got a lot.
Do you have a link to that at all that we could follow? That sounds really interesting.
Sure, I'll have a link to that in about 3 weeks' time when I'm allowed to talk about it properly.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, watch this space.
I think you're right, Alison. It's all about the aspiration and the inspiration. If we can make them aspire and be inspired to do this work in the future, then that will be, you know, half the battle won. But it's giving them those examples that can inspire them.
I think sometimes you just have to get on with it. I've always been a big advocate, and this is kind of what's been nice about being a social enterprise in a very, very small organisation, that you don't have to ask permission to do this stuff. If it sounds cool, you just do it. And sometimes you fail and sometimes you don't. But more often than not, you don't, because, you know, you get, I mean, I get to work with kids day in, day out. It's the most exhilarating experience that anybody can possibly have. And they show you stuff that you just didn't think about, you know. It just takes a kid to go, well, we could try that instead. And you go, yeah, that could work. And then you try it and it does work, because they've actually got the digital skills to move things forward, and certainly got the imagination. So
we have another question here on kind of everything you've been saying here, guys. Asking, wouldn't the ideal starting point for XR in education be through the national curriculum and then drive user demand at higher and further education?
Yes, please tell that to the ministry.
I don't know. I think you need to go the other way. I genuinely think you need to side load it, man. We need to find ways to apply it and almost hijack and hack your way in sideways. And I know Ali's done a bunch of that. And honestly, I think you see some great stuff, just Minecraft in the classroom or anything, you know, any element of that. If we can start to demonstrate it first, I think we need to go and show and prove. I don't think it's landing on national curriculum easily, other than if we can make some great exemplars. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
No, I think you're right, Martin. I mean, I think there's a technological uncertainty as well, just in terms of how these hardware and platforms will evolve. But give that 4 or 5 years, then I think the ubiquity of the experience for people through, you know, Facebook, Google, some of those platforms, I think then that argument in terms of the national curriculum you might see it being elevated. Certainly in Asia, that debate isn't even there. They already are. They're doing it at that level. But in Europe, I think probably it has to be a bit of a side hack and just community's best practice. People seeing their colleagues achieving great results. And I mean, I'm really intrigued with what Alison's saying, because that seems really powerful, where you get, you know, young people themselves just, you know, leveraging the technology and the confidence that they have. They don't have any fear. I think that's really exciting, how that can propel this technology further.
I think also look at how we do things, you know, industrially. I mean, you know, if you look at, you know, the big drive towards energy efficient buildings, kids ask the awkward questions that we just don't want to answer. So if we're going to create modular housing, really energy efficient modular housing, and then a kid goes and designs one, it's quite interesting to see the reaction of industry when the kids designed a more efficient house. you know, and tested it using the same technology that we do. And then they asked the awkward question, well, why doesn't your house perform in the same way that mine does? Because all I've done is this. And it's, yeah, sometimes you kind of have to snigger a little bit and do a bit of this, because I just love the innocence and yet the way that children pushes. It's great. So, yeah.
I feel like at this point, well, I mean, as a former teacher along in a different life, I taught kids that were special needs with severe dyslexia, dyspraxia, and ADHD, and ultimately, you know, finding out what they loved and made them tick, and evolving how I taught around that. Like, they were all obsessed with Minecraft, so I was teaching English at the time, so I said, you know, if you finish your homework early, I'll let you go on the Minecraft forum, and that's your new homework in English. And had some kids like fluent within a couple of years just by doing stuff like that. I feel like, you know, as a teacher, you can just inspire kids to want to learn and then push them to learn by doing, which I think in this industry is extremely important, because as you said, you know, it's education systems are moving really slowly. You have to push kids and students of all levels really to go out and just build something, learn how to do it and just build it. And then you'll meet the right people along the way who'll push you in the right direction. I think it's a good way to to push kids. We have only a couple minutes left, so I'll give you guys all like a final word on the topic before we close off. And if you guys are open to me sharing your contact, let me know, and I'll put it in the chat.
Sure, I'm happy to go first. Yeah, certainly share contacts. Yeah, I think timing-wise, both in terms of the maturity of the XR industry, I agree. I think with what Alex said, you know, maybe a year or two's time would have been the perfect moment when with just a little bit more traction in the entertainment space, we could have really leveraged across into education. But the screaming need is now, and I think I mean, the games industry is super mature. I mean, all the big games engines are at least 10, if not Unreal Engine's 20 years old, Unity's 10 years old plus. These are really, really solid platforms with huge communities. So the authoring content space is, to me, super mature. The headset hardware space is new, but it doesn't need to only be about that. So if we look to broaden access through the games engines to create broad immersive experiences in the teaching area, I think every aspect of teaching from super early years right the way through all of school, the space that we're directly looking at right now, higher education, but it definitely extends into lifelong learning. Every space can benefit almost right now, and then off-the-shelf tools, there are tons of them you can pick up and run with, and then we're going a bit more bespoke into specific subject area learning and labs. But I think the timing is now, and I think bringing skills from other sectors, particularly games, but the 3D element of the construction world, and where Ali and I come from, you know, architects, engineers of all kinds have got tons of latent 3D capability. All of that stuff can bleed across into education now, and I think the timing's awesome. The tools, most of the tools are there. The hardware, yeah, there's some challenges, but that's going to mature quickly. There's tons of investment, so I'm super excited. It's the right place and time to be, I think. So all good from our side. Yeah,
should I follow on from Martin there? I'm happy to share contact details. Thank you, Asha. I think for us, absolutely agree with you, Martin. It is exactly the right time. It's starting now, and I think it's a very exciting time for all of us to be involved in helping to shape the future of this area. So for us, it's about bringing industry in, helping that shape the education and working with them to ensure it's real opportunities. The more you can talk to students about real challenges and real problems, and they can see the relevance of what they're learning. And I think that's at all levels, not just at university level, but even with younger ones. The more they can see the relevance of it, the more it inspires them, I think, to dream and to work on that. So for us, I think it's a fantastic time and a very exciting opportunity.
I can just jump in. I think the points have been made mostly, but just to say that, you know, this has been a traumatic time for people, but it's also been a time of great shift and transition. So people have moved in terms of how they've worked, but also how they've educated themselves. So I suppose the two things I would say is move with your audience. So your audience are migrating now. They're in forums like this Zoom, so they're open and they're receptive to immersive environments in a way that they probably weren't even 6 months ago. So it's a great opportunity to meet them there. And reiterating Alison's point, and I try and walk the walk myself. Play around with these tools yourselves. You know, I'm trying to do little Mozilla Hubs environments with small groups, etc. I think Martin's right. It's an incredibly exciting time. There are a plethora of tools, and I think all of us, let's do a little bit of sandboxing, sandpit development ourselves, and the opportunity is very real for the forthcoming academic year from third level. So I'm certainly looking forward to discussing with the panelists, and if anyone does want to contact me, find out about what's happening in Dublin and Ireland in the space, very keen to talk. So happy to share my contact details as well.
Okay.
And I think, Alex, I'll be seeing you hopefully soon anyway. I've just had a webinar with all the teaching unions in Ireland, and certainly coming across to Dublin, touch wood, at the end of November. So I'd love to see you. And I think really my advice to everyone out there who's listening is, don't forget your best audience can actually be young people, because they really, really will test you to the limit. I think from an academic point of view, these kids will be your bums on seats in a few years. So make sure that you are that inspirational university that's ready to receive them, because that's, to me, the universities that will succeed when it's a very, very competitive world. So love to work with everyone. And Pippa, Alex, I'll definitely be in touch with you. And certainly Adrian, love to see what you're doing down at Imperial, get some of our kids involved if possible around London. So yeah, really enjoyed this. Thank you.
This was really fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all taking the time to do this. I thought it was a really excellent discussion. I really didn't think we'd be able to cover all of it, but I really managed to get a lot in, so I really, really appreciate it. I dropped all of your emails into the chat, so if anyone wants to follow up, please do so. Oh, Martin just sent his website, but to me privately, so I've just sent it to everyone as well and added a few. So that's the link for Martin's new platform, which is launching this month. And yeah, if you have any other questions, you can also follow me. And this was recorded today and will be available on the Immersion website publicly by the end of the day. So thank you all once again, and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, Amelia.
Bye.
Take care,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.